I'm Roy Huntington, editor of American Handgunner magazine, and welcome to Roy's Backyard. Except we're not actually in my backyard, we're in Roy's garage, and that's because I'm here to talk about how to clean a revolver. If you remember reading the March-April issue, my insider column, I actually talked about cleaning semi-auto pistols, and I gave you about a 5-minute quickie clean lesson, and well, we posted it, and everybody really enjoyed it, and there was a lot of requests, like 2 or 3, that I cover revolvers too, so here we go. Now, if you look to the upcoming issue, and it's actually probably the one that's out by now, that's the July-August issue. This is just what the cover is going to look like, but keep your eye open for it. I'm going to have an insider column in that one that actually goes into a little more detail than what we're going to do today. So today is just a real quick 5-6 minute lesson on how to clean a revolver, and this will work for just about any revolver, including single actions. So let's get to work. You know, you don't need many tools to clean your revolver. As a matter of fact, everything you see here will also clean just about any auto pistol you have. Some solvent, some oil, some basic cleaning gear, the magic Q-tip of course, a couple of brushes, the handy red rags, and a screwdriver that fits is about all you need. Okay, well, let's get right to work here. This is a J-frame custom gun built by Mark Morganti of Gemini Customs. What I've done beforehand is I've pre-loosened the grips. You want to take the grips off on a revolver because you get a lot of crud underneath here from oil and from sweat and whatnot. On this Smith & Wesson, if you remove this screw using a screwdriver that fits properly, that's very important to use screwdrivers that actually are gunsmith screwdrivers. You can just release the cylinder and just open it right up like that. And then another little bit of magic is the fact that you can just take the crane right off. And what this does is it serves to help keep all the goo and cleaning solvent and whatnot from creeping down inside of there as you go ahead and move through the cleaning process. Now what we're going to do right now is just get some solvent working. What I've done is you just get a bronze brush. I like to dip it in solvent. Remember, pour the solvent from the container, this is good old Hoppy's number 9, into the lid or another container. Because if you keep dipping the cleaning utensil back inside, you're just putting dirt back in your clean solvent. So you don't want that. This being a revolver, you can't clean from the breech like you can in an auto pistol. So you have to clean from the muzzle. And what we're doing here is nothing fancy. I'm mostly just getting some solvent in there, brushing a little bit of the goo in there loose, and then we're just going to let it work for a little while. And we're going to do the same thing with a cylinder. Although I will show you something else in a minute here, using an electric drill in case your cylinder is really, really scrungy. So remember, we're not really cleaning right now, we're just getting that solvent working a little bit in there. You know, in the video on cleaning auto pistols, I made it a point to talk about getting rid of a lot of the stuff, the corruption and powder residue, with a dry cloth before you start putting on solvent or oil or anything like that. Otherwise, what happens is you just end up making mud. You can see now we had quite a bit of buildup in there on the breech face, and you can see that now it's all gone. On a revolver like this, you'll get crud up in here. You'll get a lot of crud around the forcing cone especially. On the back of the cylinder, around the ejector star, and of course on the front of the cylinder. At this point, I like to use a brush. Now, you can use a bronze brush or brass brush. Now, you just have to be careful. Sometimes it will put some bronze or brass color onto your gun. All we're doing right now, you notice I didn't put any solvent on anything. We're just kind of getting off all the loose crud. That way, later on, when we actually go to using some solvent, it stays pretty clean. There we go. Now we'll just wipe this off. There was just a little bit of solvent left over from me running that brush through the bore. At this time, I'd go ahead and just take a minute, wipe off the outside. You're looking for all the obvious crud that you can. Here comes one of your miracle tools. Get in here. Don't be stingy with these too, they're cheap. Get around behind, get in all your little nooks and crannies. Let's move on to the crane. Now, the crane tends to collect some crud right around in here and around in here. That's because that's actually the face of the cylinder. That's where the cartridge, you know, the bullet actually comes out. So it's sitting on here like this. So when the explosion happens and the gases escape in the gap there, that's why it tends to collect goo just around there. So again, at this point, I'm just going to wipe off with a dry rag just to get as much stuff off as I can, so we're not making that black goo, and then get your trusty wire brush here and go ahead and wire brush this out, and you'll see it's actually starting to come clean. See that? Now if you've really got a dirty gun, you're shooting a lot of lead, you'll actually get some lead residue in there. And if you do get lead residue, either in here or up around the forcing cone here, boy, you know, you might find yourself a piece of brass and sharpen it to a sharp edge that you can use to scrape it out. Some people are daring and they'll use an X-Acto knife or something, but just be very careful if you're trying to scrape in there and scrape the lead off of here, because you can easily scratch a deep gouge in the gun, because surprisingly the frame of the gun is a lot softer than you think, and the barrel is actually very soft metal, so a hard X-Acto knife blade can actually scrape it pretty solidly. So okay, we're at a point here to where this is actually looking pretty good. You know, since we're done with the crane for now, I think it'll be just good idea if we just finish up the barrel. I'll go ahead and wet a patch again, I'm sorry, a brush, and let's brush this out a little bit. I was lazy, so I was shooting this gun with jacketed ammunition, and because of that, cleanup is relatively easy. But like I said earlier, if you're putting a lot of lead through the gun, chances are pretty good it's going to look a lot grungier than this gun does. Also, with a blued gun, it's a little harder to see just if you got all the dirt off or not. What I'm doing here is I'm just wiping up the excess solvent. Anytime you get the excess solvent around, like I said, if you don't take care of it, it just turns into goo. Now let's get a patch on here. I like to use these kind of jags here that simply push all the way through. Think about this, if you have the kind with a slit that holds the patch, what you're doing is you're pushing it through, getting all the dirt out, and then pulling it back through and putting the dirt back in where you just cleaned, and then putting the dirt back in and pulling the dirt back. See, so that's silly. What you want is you want to just push the dirt out like that. There, now do you see that? See, now we won't use that again like that. Now there's no reason, if you're a cheapskate like I am, that you can't turn it over and do it again. And if you'd like, once it's inside, you can kind of polish a little bit. Now if you pay careful attention, you can feel if there's any lead in there. It'll be grabby on the patch. Now this one here seems to go right through nice and smooth. Now one nice thing about my 5-minute gun cleaning is that I'm lazy. And frankly, I'm finished with this frame now. I'm not going to bother going in here and getting the last little teeny tiny bit of dirt out of here. Well, we might brush this up a little bit more before we're done. But otherwise, this is pretty much good to go. All right, let's move on to the cylinder here. Now, you'll notice there's some powder burns on the back here. Again, that nice stiff brass brush. Just kind of work at it a little bit like here. Now remember, there was some solvent that's been cooking in here for a while, and actually solvent needs a little time to work. It'll loosen up the powder residue, it'll loosen up lead, it'll loosen up jacketing material, and then when you go over with a wire brush, you'll be surprised at just how well it does. Now you're never going to get all the burn marks off the face of the cylinder, so don't worry about it. That's the life of owning a revolver. But you can get the heavy duty stuff off, and why you want to keep that clean is because as the cylinder rotates when it's in the revolver, the forcing cone is very close to there, so if you let crud build up right on the face of the cylinder, it can bind against the forcing cone just before the bullet goes into the revolver or into the barrel. So now let's finish brushing out the chambers. You can see here it's pretty easy. Now chamber in this is a .357 Magnum revolver, but anything like a .38 or a centerfire cartridge, most of them have a step in the very end here, and that's essentially just the last little bit where the bullet goes through. So with some brushes, if you tend to push it all the way through like that, what you're going to do is you'll force the bristles down to be sized to the slightly smaller opening here, and then they won't do you any good at the beginning. So I like to just go in a little bit so you can see that it just barely sticks out. So that way this part of the brush stays full size and the front part cleans in that little smaller opening. Now this is kind of a worn brush, but I think you get the point there. So okay, let's wipe out just a little bit of the stuff we've collected, and we'll get a patch, and the same rule applies here. You want to push it straight through. See that? That's how you get the dirt. And then just go ahead and repeat that for all the other ones. Now at this point I want you to look at something. See? You just push the ejector star out like this, and you'll see some crud collected back down in here, old oil, powder grains. Just take a second, just clean that up a little bit. There you go. And then if you really want to have a good time, get yourself a soft brush and clean the ejector star. There we go. Because the cylinder hand actually bears on this surface here, and that's what helps you to turn the revolver. This is a little bit of magic I was going to show you, and talk about a lazy man's way of doing this. Get a long brush like this for a rifle, chuck it in an electric drill, and what you're going to do is you're going to insert it very carefully, put it in, let it stick out just a little bit, because you're crushing down the very end of the brush. So, and then just go ahead and move it back and forth a little bit like that, and then take it out. And this will just really clean the lead and the goo out of there. Now don't overdo it, and I wouldn't use a stainless steel brush for this at all. Well, now you know the secret with the electric drill. I went ahead and took a couple of minutes during our break, and I cleaned out the rest of the chambers. I ran another patch through the barrel and kind of got everything pretty much organized. So let's reassemble it, and it's actually very easy. Before reassembling though, I do like to just get a Q-tip or something and run it down through here. And you'll see you'll get just a little bit of crud out of there. Now remember, you can take as much time for this as you want to. I was fortunate here in that the gun wasn't very dirty. But if it might take you 10 minutes or something, if you want to be a little more fastidious, go right ahead. Now on oiling a revolver, you really don't need much. We're going to put just a little bit right here, and then I like to smear it around. Slip this back on so you can feel it spin nice and smooth. So we'll just slip this back in. You want to line up one of these flutes right here with the side here as you close this back in. There we go. Oops. There we go. Now normally at this point then I would go ahead and put the grips on. I would put that screw back in. But what I want to do is now is just show you that your sort of final act of defiance is to just get a nice clean rag and go ahead and give it a nice good wipe. Now one thing about this kind of hard chrome or bead blasted soft stainless steel finish is that it certainly shows the dirt. So it's actually really easy to see where you need to wipe down and where you don't need to wipe down. Now you did notice that I think I used 2 or 3 drops of oil on this. With most revolvers, you really don't have to use very much oil. Maybe once a year or so, if you know what you're doing, go ahead and take the side plate off, put a drop or 2 of oil in there, and if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. Because I know revolvers that have gone their whole life without any additional oil or lubricant in the action. The action's very hard, so it really needs very little lubrication. So there you go. We've got about a 5-minute revolver cleaning. Now remember, this works exactly the same way for a single action like this one. This is a Turnbull manufacturing gun. It's still a revolver. You still have to clean from the muzzle. The cylinder will come out, so all the rules apply. You have a forcing cone, you have a breech face. So like I said, unless you really like to clean your guns, I'd give it about 5 good minutes with these basic tools and you're in business. Well, there you go. That was pretty easy, I think. And you can tell I'm lazy, and frankly, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I shoot all my guns all the time, and if I took an hour or 2 to clean a gun each time, I'd only be cleaning guns rather than shooting, and that's not fun. Well, don't forget, if you haven't read it, read the July-August issue of American Handgunner, and you can go online at www.americanhandgunner.com. Click on the digital edition, and you can read my insider about revolver cleaning. Down the road, just because a lot of people have asked, we'll talk about how do you clean a rifle and how do you clean a shotgun. There's some real easy tips for that kind of stuff too. So hey, thanks for tuning in to Roy's Backyard, and I'll see you next time.